Und der Haifisch, der hat Zähne und die trägt er im Gesicht. Und Mac Heath, der hat ein Messer, doch das Messer sieht man nicht, oh. When the shark bites with his teeth, dear, and he shows them pearly white, oh, just a jackknife that old Mac Heath brings, and he keeps them way out of sight, oh. When the shark bites with his teeth, dear, scarlet billows start to spread, oh, but fancy white gloves that old Mac Heath wears, so there's never a trace of red. But on the sidewalk, Sunday morning, there's a body oozing life, but someone sneaking around that corner. That someone is Mac the Knife. It takes many voices to tell a story. And we're going on a walking tour to tell the story of jazz in Berlin, with visits to memories and landmarks and social change. Mac the Knife is a story about a stealth killer. Not really, but it's a song that was performed in 1928 and aired at the Theater am Schiffbauerndamm. But the history in brief of this song is that it would go on to be one of the most covered songs in jazz history. Jazz uses many voices to tell a story. It tells the story of how African rhythms meet European traditions. And transported via the organ of slavery, tell stories through the spirituals and hymns of the Black church. And tell other stories, those of love and of loss, of pain and freedom, through the blues. And so using the voices of jazz, our first stop on the tour is memory. By memory, I mean simply something recalled from the past. My first memory of Mac the Knife was not 1928, but it was a Christmas celebration, actually many Christmas celebrations, where my great Aunt Barbara would burst out and sing this song as if she was Mac the Knife herself. And I only found out recently that a few of my aunts only found out now that Mac the Knife is not a Christmas song. Because the thing is, when I heard that song again, sung in German as a performer, it was like walking into a familiar room and all the furniture gone. You see, hearing that song again, having studied jazz history, threw me back to my childhood and framed the setting of a story untold, much like finding C.S. Lewis's Narnia behind the walls of a wardrobe. So again, this memory is important when we start talking about the memory of jazz in Berlin. The images you see here, one is of Nubian subjects, of what were human zoos in Berlin in the 19th century. The other photo is one of colonial subjects, of an empire that was run by the Kaisers from 1884. So by the time Black American music makes it to Berlin, with the Fisk Jubilee Singers, a gospel choir from a historically Black college in the United States, these images would have been commonplace, not on Wikipedia, but images that Berliners had seen before. And so this continues, this interest continues until the outbreak of World War I. And what replaces the Kaisers at this time is the Weimar Republic, a republic founded on the ideals of democracy and free thinking. But it was also the cabaret era of jazz, the golden age of jazz. And cabaret brings to mind all sorts of memories, that of chorus lines, of dancing girls, of vaudeville shows, and Liza Minnelli and the star of a Broadway play. But a musician told me once, cabaret was that and more. It was an actual space where musicians could collaborate and improvise. Another musician chimed in and said, that's true, but not everyone could join in those spaces. And it's the spaces that bring us to our next stop on the tour, that of landmark. By landmark, I mean simply a space, an event, or an object that marks a turning point. And during the Weimar Republic, ballrooms, such as Klärchen's Ballhaus in Berlin, would be packed with swing Jugend, or swing youth in English, who would pack and dance to the new swing craze that would characterize the Roaring '20s. Swing is the dance of jazz. I mean, there are many dances, the Charleston, the Shim Sham, the Lindy Hop. And these would have been, again, commonplace in memory. But the turning point that happens is that with the rise of Nazi socialism, many of these swing Jugend who would flock to these ballrooms knew that raids, not air raids, but raids of these ballrooms were imminent. And that many who served in the German Hitler Youth by day and were found in these ballrooms by night would be sent to schools to learn the distinction between high and inferior art. And so with the outbreak of World War II, ballrooms such as Klärchen's closed. And particularly, this one was used as a canteen during the war. We also see a change in the way songs are remembered and used. There's a popular song called Bei mir bist du schön, which is adopted as a national song, until it was found out that it was written by a Jewish couple as the ballad love song of a Yiddish play. And so when we hear and see or observe intently a change in how songs and spaces are used, it often means that the voice of social change is not far behind. Which brings us to our third stop. Now, social change, for me, just means simply a change in the ideas of how we should live, how we should run our lives. And this was the imminent question by the close of the war in 1945. As Berlin was divided into two, with the Soviets taking the East, the Americans, the British, and the French in the West, what managed to cross borders was jazz. Because during the war, the radios had expanded so that music could be heard in the East and West. It could be heard over oceans. And so, as this division is concretized with the building of the Berlin Wall in 1961, jazz musicians in the East could not go to the West. Frankly, no one could go to the West. Jazz developed qualitatively different on either side of the wall. But yet we know there were collaborations between musicians. We know that Jutta Hipp in the East and Klaus Doldinger in the West heard each other's music. And Louis Armstrong, a prominent American jazz performer, gave concerts on both sides of the wall as the civil rights movement in his own country, the US, was underway. So this continues until 1989, which is also the last stop on the tour. Because what we know is that as two cities became one, as a country moved towards unification, many voices are needed to tell that story. In German, the word Geschichte can also be used for story and history, which is why bringing in many voices allows for a multisensory understanding, a multisensory knowledge of our story, much like a tour, much like jazz. And so the challenge is in acknowledging that while, yes, many of the history books are written by the winners, the stories are told and retold through the memories and the landmarks and the voices of social change, of those who didn't necessarily make it on the page. And so doing so makes a whole world seem quite new. You've been really swell. I'd have to admit you deserve expressions that really fit you. And so I've warped my brain trying to explain a few things about jazz in Berlin. Bei mir bist du schön. Again I will explain. Bei mir bist du schön means you're grand. I could say Bella, Bella, even say wunderbar. Each language only helps me tell you how grand you are. By chance bist du schön. Again I will explain, so tell me and say you'll understand. So tell me and say you'll understand, oh. So tell me and say you'll understand.